Our speaker today is Dr. Richard Bryan. The title is Life and Reincarnation.
I've been working on this talk for 70 years. I'm going to try to do it in 20 minutes, but there's a whole lot, there's so much. I don't know exactly where to start. When I started college in 1949, I was struggling. I'd become a Presbyterian several years earlier, and I was struggling with trying to create for myself, even at that time, a personal theology that just sort of made sense to me. And I was struggling with Christianity in large measure because of several issues, which I put down. One was, it seemed to me that people were they were coming to church supposedly to become better at something, but it didn't seem like anybody was really changing. And that we were having a very good time. There were plenty of parties and things going on, but it didn't seem like we were getting anywhere in terms of actually becoming something. When I was being taught that if you believed in Jesus Christ as your personal savior, that was really all you needed to do, and that was fine. And then everything else was it would run by itself, which somehow just left me thinking there's something missing here. And then there was the question of hell. It really bothered me. I couldn't see why we had to have a hell. I figured considering the people I knew, that there'd be a whole lot more people in hell than in heaven. And it didn't seem like it was a really workable possibility for my thinking. Then there was the question of what is the place of money in my personal story. In fact, I remember deliberately thinking when I was 21 or 22, is it better to try to do the best thing you can for people around you and let your actions be what you speak to the world? Or is it better to go out and earn a lot of money and then give it to projects that sort of do what you're talking about, what you're thinking about? And it never was quite, for me, it became fairly easy to say, no, I'm not interested really in making money. I'm much more interested. I was a teacher then, and I loved teaching, and I have been teaching ever since. Finally, I think, and this came along much later, I had to ask myself, what is the place of competition in a development of a personal spiritual world? What is it? And I thought to myself, there's something, that whole idea of serious competition seems to work against spiritual development. And they seem to be somehow antithetical to each other. So those are the things I was struggling with even those many years ago. And here I'm sort of working off of a few notes here. So the first thing that really came to me to change my mind was I discovered Ray Moody's book in 1975 when it first came out, the Life After Life book, where he talks about people having near-death experiences. I'm sure you've all read Ray Moody's book. If you haven't, I've still got it on my shelf over there. I've got my original copy. I was so impressed with it. And what he talks about is all the different people who having near-death experiences were out of their bodies, conscious souls, and came back again. And I met a couple of people in those days who had that experience. It turns out my daughter has had this experience. One of my daughters has had this experience several times. And it opened a whole new door in my mind about the fact that it seemed to me at this point that there were two parts to us. There was a spiritual part, and then there was this body part that I seemed to be living in. And so when a copy of There Is a River, it happened to be my father's copy, came to me about, 1988 probably. I read this with such great enthusiasm, and as I read it, I said, all of this seems to fit my search for a personal theology. And so what I'm going to do is try to talk a little bit about this And then I hope what I want to do is have a conversation. If anybody would, I'd like to have you ask questions about some of this. Okay. I'm going to read a little. I've heard I wrote something. Edgar Casey was a devout Christian. And at some point he accidentally discovered that he was hypnotizable, and he could self-induce a trance in which he would deliver primarily information about other people's health. Most of you know Edgar Casey because he lives, the center is only about 400 miles east of you over in Virginia Beach. And the Casey readings, and I will always refer to them as what the readings say, because Edgar Casey was basically a vehicle of information. It was not Edgar Casey who was doing the speaking. And he was very surprised as things that came through. For instance, the whole notion of reincarnation, which came through him in the readings over and over again after, and he had a very hard time putting that together with his own devout Christianity. Ultimately, so much of it came through that he made peace with that, and they began to accept the readings that they were kind of making sense. Well, as I looked at this and saw this, I really felt very comfortable, as if somehow this had all satisfied what I had been looking for in a personal theology. So I found in there what I consider there are 5 essential questions. I'm sort of keeping my eye on what I'm saying because I've got so much. There are 5 essential questions that seem to me I wanted to talk about. What kind of creatures are we? What are we made of? How did we get here? Why are we here? And what is the purpose of our being here? Seems to me that these Casey readings do actually answer most of this. I need to do a couple of things about language. In the first place, I'm always going to refer to this as the readings because it's not Edgar Casey who's speaking. There's some other voice that is relaying this information through his mouth, which is now being copied down. And in the Virginia Beach, there are something like 15,000 readings. There's an enormous number. As I say, most of which were given as interpretations for medical problems. And very interesting, I thought. The second thing is that there are 2 words that are very interesting in here that turn up over and over again. Since he talks about every one of us, we're entities. He always talked about, well, the entity needs to do this or that, which is an interesting word because it does not have a sex connection to it. And evidently, on the other side, we don't have a real sex connection. That as we come into our worldly experience, we choose a sex, as he says, we choose our parents as well. So this is the first. The first is the word entity. The second is when he says we come to Earth, we come into Earth in what he calls a sojourn. Now, I looked that word up yesterday, and what it says is a sojourn is a visit as in a foreign land. Now, I thought in my sense, that's quite profound. And in some sense, living in the earth is kind of a foreign land for our fundamental spirits, in my mind. And our fundamental spirits really exist everywhere, and they're out there, and they make this journey. And it's kind of it's as if, in my mind, that our spirit slips into this body that we wear for a few years, as if it were a handler going into a glove. And the same way, when we transition, when we pass, our spirit slips out of this body, and it just goes back to the usual earthly condition and becomes what it came from in the first place, earthly material. And okay, so those 2 words. All right, so now I think I'm going to read what I wrote for each of these, because I spent a lot of time trying to short version this. Okay, number 1, what kind of creatures are we? There is a cosmic creative source that created us all as spiritual beings. We were created to be companions, beings for this creative source and equal to it. notice that there's a parallel creative activity in human beings. When we think about our own children, we bring our own children into the world really to be companions to us, and we love them dearly and feel them as adults as equals. And I think that same kind of relationship is our spiritual relationship to the great cosmic source. What are we made of? Our spirit beings are made of finer or pure material than the rather coarse material which we find in us around us in the earth. I suspect it's pure light or various kind or strings of various kinds. As a physicist and string theorist, I absolutely believe that's probably what the source of our spiritual being is. It's strings of light of some sort. I don't think we can ever really understand it on this side, but it feels like that to me. What that is, we're made of. It's different, and it's a very fine material our spirits are made of, that is not really affected by the behavior of what this material our body is, that our bodies are made of. In other words, in my mind, they're really absolutely two separate parts of us. There is a spiritual part, which is this fine pure matter, and there is this coarse body, which I recognize in my own self is beginning to get a little worn and feels like the pull date's already kind of come and gone. But I'm still here, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. Okay. How did we get here? Our spirit beings consciously chose to enter into the earth to experience and enter into a body at birth. The readings say that we choose our parents for various reasons. And I have told my children, I thank them many times for choosing me as their parent, because I actually believe that that's true. And I think they chose us all. I think our children chose us for reasons. In fact, I can figure out for all but one of my children, I know why I was chosen as a parent for them. So I have a fairly strong feeling that this makes sense to me. Why are we here? Well, a sojourn to Earth is a visit to free will school. Now, this is a really important concept in my mind. We live in free will school. Free will, it's a place where we don't know everything, because if we did know everything, we couldn't make choices. We wouldn't have to make choices because we would know everything. So we are living in a world in which much information is obscured from us about how things really are, so that we can practice making choices. And I think, and this is what the whole earthly experience that we have is about, learning how to make proper choices that aim in a certain direction. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Finally, what is the purpose of our being here? According to the Casey readings, the goal is that we should develop our spirits to become a creative, peaceful, and interesting companion to return to the source. Just as we would hope that our children become creative, interesting, and peaceful people to be our companions and to be a support to that world in which they live. All right. Now, what else? There was something else. There's some other little things I have to put in here. Okay. So coming here, one of the things that the Casey readings say is that we have a karmic, we all have a karma from our life experiences here of every time we come. And Casey says that we had the Casey readings say we have to come here. Most people visit the earth 30 times before they get it right. And what does getting it right mean? Okay, I wrote this down. I think what we're here for is to overcome three things. We're trying to overcome fear, we're trying to overcome attachment, and we're trying to overcome anger. Now, in the readings, if you were a really angry person, these things interfere with getting to be a highly spiritual person. In fact, I think the Dalai Lama was the one who said, if you're angry, you're living in the past. If you're fearful, you're living in the future. If you're at peace, you're living in the present. And I think our goal is to sort of get to the where we live in the present. That's at one point. See, my notion about what it means, what we're trying to do, is to get rid of our anger. And there are things, for instance, you can't stop your reflexes from giving you something. Sometimes you get a surprise that upsets you. I have a 15-minute rule. I allow myself to feel whatever it feels for 15 minutes, and then you got to shut it off. Now, it works most of the time. It doesn't always work, but it does help. And so I'm trying not to over respond for very long on anything. Attachment, the notion of attachment. I collect things. I've collected all kinds of things, but I'm really not attached to. If they all disappeared today, that would be fine with me. It was the act of collecting them that I was interested in. I mean, stamps, coins, thimbles, marbles. I've collected them all. But I was interested in the history and the study of them, and not in the items that have any. None of them have any real value, either in the real world or to me. I just was interested in collecting them for their history. So I never really felt attached to these things at all. But I think we're trying to overcome that notion of attachment. Finally, fear. What does it to be fearless really means? Not even to, in my mind, that you don't even fear for your own life. That you're willing to say, okay, that goes, and it's okay because I'm only going to leave this body. I'll be out there somewhere. I'll make some other visits, and I'm sure I'll sojourn here again if I haven't solved all the problems. The other day, I tried to write a what I thought being a human being in this life would be like to be at perfect peace. And this is what I wrote. And this is why I think I don't know whether I've covered enough there's so many things, but I'd like to have you ask questions about some of this. To be at perfect peace, I want you to consider yourself, you're walking down a quiet space and someone pops out in front of you and confronts you with a knife. And you stop in your tracks and you look at this person. And in my mind, the person with the peace would say, my mind would automatically say to itself, hello, my friend, what have I done to offend you? What part of my karma are you from? I have no fear. If you have a problem with me, let us reason together. Perhaps we can help each other. I told that to one of my retired military friends, and he said, I'd just take out a gun and shoot him. And I thought, you really missed the whole point of what I'm trying to get at. Because it seems to me that now that seems extreme, but in fact, the model that and the Casey readings talk about Jesus as an example for how we're to live. And there's he had to die a violent death, I think, in order to we could see that dying a violent death is not the end. That it's okay. That we are only in a transition. Mother Teresa, what is her whole notion? She really just wanted to be able to hold these children as they were dying, saying, I do not want these children to die alone. To me, that's a statement of complete it's not really sacrifice. It's attachment to an aspect of life that most of us don't think much about. She's gone into this very messy world, and she really wants to offer some connectedness, condolence, caring about these people. The Dalai Lama is a good example. I have actually met in my life. I've only met one completely peaceful person in my entire life. And for 15 years, I was a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And this was this guy was a bishop. He was a truck mechanic. And I just one quick story, and I'm going to end with this because I'd love to have you ask me questions about some of this. Here, he said, in my basement, he says, I have a refrigerator that doesn't have anything in it, but it sits there in a corner. And when people get upset with me and they have trouble with me and I hear it either from them or from someone else, I call them on the phone and say, I've got a refrigerator I need to move to the other side of my basement. Would you come over and help me? And so he gets the person to come over and they get down there and they move the refrigerator across the room together. And in the meantime, they're talking to each other and he can usually work out and figure out what's going on and try to make peace with this problem. And I thought this is an amazingly reasonable way to deal with people. In other words, the concern is about the people. Anyway, that's in my mind, the goal then is to try to become a peaceful person. And that's where I'm going to stop. And I'd love to answer any questions. Incidentally, that whole package does satisfy me. I haven't really done the entire karmic thing, but the whole notion of reincarnation, it satisfies me because there were many problems I think I had solved before I came here the first time. I know this is not my first time around. So this is, but I find this a very satisfying spiritual, personal spiritual position. Thank you.